A report from Group 17 by Robert C. O'Brien, Chapter 25. The road was dark, narrow, and deserted. It had been 1 o'clock when they left the laboratory. Dr. Schutz carrying his papers under his arm, the girl wearing her blue coat. Together they had walked along the wall to the gate, opened it, and stepped out of Villa Petrograd forever. They had 5 hours until dawn, 5 hours for a walk of 3 miles, and Dr. Schutz was glad for the time. The girl now seemed definitely ill, though not seriously, and limped as if one of her legs hurt. They would have to stop and rest frequently. "We will go for our walk now," he had said at the outset. "But since it is night, we will go quietly. We must not wake anyone." When they came to the top of the hill and passed the first house, a white house on the left, although she stared at it, she said nothing. The delay in leaving had been caused primarily by shock. When he had entered the laboratory to get the girl, he had found Georg Wolter dead, newly and grotesquely dead on the floor. His first reaction had been panic. The spies, Nikolai's spies, had been real, had broken in and killed Georg. He would run, forget the girl. Then he realized he could not run without the papers from the inner laboratory. He forced himself to stand absolutely still for a minute. The silence reassured him. He looked again, and slowly it became clear what had happened. He saw the bloodied chimpanzee cowering in the corner of its cage, saw the electric prod, saw the broken cage door. He had known for some time that Georg was a sadist. All of the animals had shown fear of him, and this time he had gone too far. But the girl was still sleeping quietly, unharmed in her cage. He did not think that Abe was likely to attack him or her, but to be sure, he took some wire from the tool cabinet and refastened the door, crudely but well enough. Next, he entered the inner laboratory and flicked on the light. It was quiet, undisturbed, and contained no spies. He sat at his desk and tried to calm and collect his thoughts. He had not been fond of Georg, and now that the shock had passed, had no particular feeling about his death. Their association would have ended tonight in any case, but he needed to think. What effect would the death have on his own plans? After some consideration, he decided perhaps none, but possibly 2 effects, both good. The first was that it might confuse the Russians. It would take them longer to determine where and why he had gone. The second was that it might delay their finding out he had gone at all, for Georg would certainly have been the first to notice his absence and report it to Kublitz. Now, on the dark road, he wondered how long it would be before they found Georg. When that happened, his own departure would be immediately discovered, and a pursuit be started. How intensive a pursuit he did not know. They would be more concerned about the papers than about him. Their reports from Group 17, their secret research on biological warfare, they could not know that he planned to make no use at all of that research. His own, which they had never grasped, made it obsolete. He thought it might be as much as 12 hours before they found Georg, perhaps not until the new security guards went up to use the laboratory bathroom. The girl stumbled and almost fell. He caught her arm and held her up. They must rest again. "We will sit down," he said. "Where?" "There, ahead." Pasture on the side of the road. Woods on the other, no fence. They could walk a few feet into the woods and sit. It would be wet, no help for that. But by good luck he found a large and reasonably dry log. They sat on it. The rain had stopped, the wind had changed, and the sharp chill was gone from the air. He looked at the small, silent figure sitting beside him and had a feeling almost of pity for her. He could not see her face in the dark, but back in the laboratory he had noticed that she looked pale, thin, and tired. He had at least found pins and fastened her torn trousers and her loose sleeve. The blue coat hid most of it in any case. He had washed her face and even tried to comb some of the tangles from her hair with his pocket comb, but it was hopeless, and he had finally given up. He thought, once in Washington, he had contacted an organization whose number he had memorized. Then there would be money. They could buy her new clothes, a pretty dress to wear on the air flight. There would be better food and someone who knew how to fix her hair. He said, "Now we will walk some more." She stood up obediently, but just as they reached the edge of the road, he said, "Wait!" He led her a few steps back into the woods. A car was coming, moving fast, in the direction they had been walking, coming from the direction of the villa. Now he saw its headlights and realized it was not one car, but 2. For a moment his heart sank. Could they have found out already? But as the cars sped past, he remembered that they had walked a mile or so back, past the driveway, leading on to a very large estate. His fear was foolish. They must have come from there, 2 American speedsters on business of their own. The Virginia Transit Company's 7 a.m. express commuters bus carried mostly regulars. Fred, the driver, knew them all by face and half by name. "Good morning, Fred." "Good morning, Mr. Booth." Mr. Booth was a lawyer in the Commerce Department. Fred got them all to the terminal in downtown Washington, 11 and H by 8:20. But this morning there were 2 strangers, and strange was the right word. They got on at River Crossing Road, the next to last stop he made before the locals took over. A ratty-looking kid in a coat 3 sizes too big, a girl with hair that looked as if she had washed it in mud. She looked half dead for sleep. She looked sick. With her, a man with gray hair and thick glasses needing a shave. "What stuff here, please?" A foreign accent, a Dutchman. "To Washington, please, a buck apiece." "I beg your pardon?" $2, mister, $2. The man looked pleased. He stuck his hand in his pocket and came up with 2 wrinkled singles. When they went to their seat, the man whispered something to the girl. She closed her eyes and went to sleep, her head leaning against the window. Had they been waiting all night at that bus stop? Fred reached number 123, the Bridge Highway, and from there on turned all his attention to getting his blue and silver monster through the rush hour traffic. Mr. Bales, aroused from sleep by telephone at 4 a.m., had made some calls of his own from home and set certain large machinery in motion. One of his calls would trickle down eventually to Officer Simon's lieutenant, so Mr. Bales had, by request, left his name out of it. He reached his office in the big white building at 7. It was a large office, secure behind 2 secretaries, furnished in walnut and a dark green leather sofa. Through a double window, one could look out between the trees and glimpse a flash of the same river where, 15 miles upstream, Fergus had gone fishing. Fergus and Simon sat on the sofa. Colonel Attenborough arrived at 7:15. At 8 a.m., the phone on Mr. Bales' desk began to ring. The first call was a long one. Mr. Bales took notes, said little, and in the end thanked the caller and asked him for a written report. When he hung up, he said to Fergus, "We checked your hunch, a good one. If Schutz is defecting, he's got a lovely friend at the top. Ever heard of Friedrich Cassel? The name is familiar. I've read it." "My God," said Colonel Attenborough, "he's Secretary of War." "Minister of Defense," Mr. Bales corrected, "of the German Republic. But in the old days, in Silesia, he was Hauptmann Kassel, a captain of the army of the Third Reich. He had military command of the district where Schutz had his laboratory, the one that produced the zombies. They became close friends and cooperated beautifully. Cassel had an amateur's interest in Schutz's experiments. Schutz had a scientific admiration of Cassel's military efficiency, his ability to produce human laboratory subjects of a specific size, sex, age, weight. Real teamwork. Young Cassel got away when the Russians came. Young Schutz got caught. With that on his record, how did Cassel ever get elected defense minister? That was 27 years ago. He was a young officer doing his duty. Most of the records were destroyed. Most, but not all. We have a pretty good dossier on Cassel. And he's still interested in new weapons? Of course, that's why he's Minister of Defense. The phone continued to ring. By 8:30, Mr. Bales had private confirmation that from inside Villa Petrograd that Dr. Schutz had in fact flown the coop. "They don't know anything about the girl," he said. "We can't confirm her presence at all. But they've found Wolter, and they found a big hole cut in their antenna. They think Schutz did it." "What else? Or who else?" said Simon. "What are they going to do?" "So far, nothing. Waiting for instructions, but they'll have to try to catch him. He took some secret documents, probably his own reports." "The Group 17 reports," Fergus said. "Of course. They won't care too much about him. They can disown him, but they've got to get their papers back." By 9, Mr. Bales had another report. "No Russian car has been stolen. Your panel truck, with its regular driver, spent the night at the embassy. It's there now. It's supposed to go to the airport to pick up some packages for Villa Petrograd. Sort of hush-hush, probably a load of vodka," Simon said. "Damn. Then how did they go?" By 10, Mr. Bales received another call and could tell him. "The simplest possible way. They took the bus. The driver noticed them because they looked strange. The man wore thick glasses and spoke with an accent. Didn't seem to understand American money. The girl looked dirty and sick. When they got to the Washington terminal, the man went to a phone booth. The driver went into a coffee shop. When he came out, they were gone. He'd been shown a picture of Alice and Adam, and he's positive it's the same girl. We have no picture of Dr. Schutz, Simon said. But how could he know about the bus? Apparently he knows more than we suspected. As you yourself said, he's got to have a plan worked out. He didn't just run off into the woods, and he isn't just going to wander around Washington. So the important question, Fergus said, is whom did he call from that phone booth? But even as he said it, he felt like cheering, felt like running to tell Mrs. Adam that her daughter was truly and demonstrably alive, if not yet safe. There is an organization, Mr. Bale said, or there used to be, of ex-Nazis or, say, extreme right-wing Germans. It had a branch in Washington. I'm not up on it, because being here, it's FBI business, not ours. It may have dissolved, but I doubt it. The Israelis would know, and maybe the FBI. We're checking with them. But I remember how it started. In a way, I was in on it. I was working in the State Department, intelligence section. There wasn't any CIA then, you remember, in December of 1941. The German embassy in Washington closed down, and its personnel were ordered home. They were allowed to leave, of course, since they had diplomatic immunity. But 8 of them refused. They claimed to be anti-Hitler and asked for asylum. I was one of those at State who were assigned to evaluate these sudden changes of loyalty. Some were real, but a couple at least had their instructions from the Fuhrer. They were agents, of course, we couldn't prove it. And in the end, they were all allowed to stay. I even remember one of their names, Peter Zimmer. He'd been the press attaché, and he was a real Nazi boy if I ever saw one. They weren't worth a dime as spies because we watched them too closely. But after the war, as good Germans, they were in a pretty spot to help their ex-Nazi friends. They worked as businessmen, lobbyists, propagandists, and when the U.S. started pouring in money to rebuild Germany, they made sure some of it got to their buddies. They also helped some of them escape to South America. As I said, I lost track of them when I came over here, but if they're still around, and Schutz can find them, they'll help him. Help him how? Fergus asked. Peter Zimmer's hair was still blonde, with only touches of gray, and was parted in the middle. He wore a gray suit, white shirt, and dark tie. Though he was in his 50s, he had the trim look of an athlete, which he retained by vigorous hiking and by playing football, German style, with his 3 sons. He had learned the vigorous lifestyle long ago with the Hitlerjugend. His eyes were clear, blue, and chilly. He had an office downtown in the Ring Building, a home in an elegant northwestern suburb, but was at the moment in a substantial red brick house in Georgetown, a home away from home, for visiting German businessmen and officials on unofficial business. It bore no identification but a street number. Its staff were competent, trusted, and all bilingual. It was not an office building, but its large and rather somber library did contain a business-like desk of dark oak inlaid with leather. From behind the desk, Herr Zimmer spoke to Dr. Schutz, who sat before it. "We have arranged a room for you on the 3rd floor. I believe you will be comfortable there. It has its own bath and quite a pretty view of the Dumbarton Oaks Park. I suggest that you stay in the room as much as possible until it is time for you to leave. Meals will be brought to you, and you may order what you need, clothes, toilet articles, luggage, through the man who brings them. His name is Hans. The girl will be placed in the charge of his wife, Hilda, who will get her cleaned up and buy her some presentable dresses. I have talked to our friend in Bonn and read him very precisely the message you gave me. He was, to understate things, quite astonished to hear that you are still alive. However, he remembers you well, sent you his greeting, and agrees that you will be a valuable asset in the new Germany. He seems especially interested in the part of the message about, what was it? The Steinkampf effect. He will make the arrangements necessary for your reception, shall we say, in Hamburg. Meanwhile, our own arrangements are progressing. The passports will take a day to prepare. The airline reservations, those we must study a little. It is not yet clear how hard our friends at Villa Petrograd are going to try to stop you. It is possible that a devious route will be safer than a direct one. It is also possible to trick them. A very simple trick, but it has worked before. Washington has 2 airports. We send them to one, you go to the other. You say you are sure they know nothing about the girl? Only Georg Walter knew, said Dr. Schutz. And he is now, as I told you, quite unable to tell. That will help. Even so, I think it is wise to return to the villa the secret papers you took. Return them? As you yourself have realized, the KGB will be more concerned about the papers than about you. If they find the papers, most of the pressure will be off. But they contain all my data. While you rested, I took the liberty of having them photocopied. The originals may now be found by the Russians. I will have them placed, perhaps a bit scattered in the woods near the gate, where you dropped them in your haste to escape. Dr. Schutz looked dubious. I think they will not believe it. Possibly not, and yet I think your friend Kublitz will believe it. It will save his skin. May I see the copies? Herr Zimmer unlocked a drawer in the desk and handed a sheaf of papers to Dr. Schutz. You will find them quite complete and somewhat clearer than the originals. We have a very fine copying machine, a German make, much superior to the American and Japanese models. I am, among other things, the American representative of the firm that manufactures them. Having examined the papers, Dr. Schutz said, It is a pleasure to deal once again with efficiency. I express my gratitude for all you are doing. Peter Zimmer opened another drawer of the desk and took from it a gray stone bottle and 2 small glasses. He poured and handed one glass to Dr. Schutz. When one has an efficient apparatus, he said, it is a pleasure to use it. In recent years, we do not often have the opportunity. He held up his glass. To the New Germany. Prost. And that is the end of chapter 25.